It could be argued that the first conscious lesson that each of us had to learn, that we actually remember as children, was that we have to share. Right? We have to share. And this is something that's so important to our parents and a family that they find different ways to help us to learn this lesson. I think you know that I'm the fourth child of 9, and so my learning of this lesson has a distinct character, because as number 4, my brother Mark, 2 years after me, was number 5, and he was born with special needs. And he was special, and he remains special. He's sort of the center and heart of our family. Can you imagine, by the way, parents, I see a lot of wonderful children, but 5 boys in a row? Maybe just some sympathy for my mother. But I remember at Christmas, this is a big deal, you know, when you got a gift that you could claim as your own. But what would invariably happen is Mark's pure enthusiasm for my gifts almost became his gifts. And I remember he was so euphoric. I remember the milk truck being one, and he just had even more excitement for my gift than I did. And I remember feeling kind of helpless as he claimed it and looking at my parents, and they'd just be like, what are you going to do, you know? So Mark and I, to this day, it's a little bonding place of how my gifts were actually his gifts, you know? But I want to propose that this learning to share is a lesson that never ends. It's a lesson that never ends, and there's so much at stake. I mean, when you're in grade school, middle school, and high school, you have to learn to share friends. Otherwise, you just become insecure and cliquey, you know? We have to learn to share our time all the time. Such as C.S. Lewis has this great chapter in the Screwtape Letters of, just convince them that it's their time. We have to learn to share our gifts and ultimately our resources. I'm not going to preach on it, because I think Pat proclaiming St. James speaks for itself, huh? But whoa, careful. You hold your riches to yourself. There are consequences. Not because God's out to get us, because it does something to us. It stunts our growth. We are not maturing as creatures made in His image. We're holding on to things instead of giving it away. I want to propose that the gospel in particular shows us the heart of Jesus, which is hospitable love. There is no us-them paradigm. There is no mine ultimately and yours. Notice how this begins. It's John, one of the sons of thunder, huh? Jesus gave him that nickname. He loved his zeal. But notice what John says. Jesus, we notice someone doing something in your name that we've been able to do because of you, and he doesn't follow us. Isn't that interesting? There's a little mistake there, you know? What he probably should have said is, he doesn't follow you, or at least that we know of. But he says us. You know, dear people of St. Ambrose, there are things about our life that are so beautiful, but some of them are not essential. They're incidental. And if we make them essential, then it's easier for people to feel like outsiders. And notice that Jesus gives an interpretation that is expansive rather than restrictive in his approach. He's like, no, don't stop him. Whatever not for against me is for me. I want to ask you a question. How passionately do you feel about sharing what's ultimately of greatest value to each of us? Our belonging to Jesus in the church. How much do you burn, I really want that for others? It's not about my judgment or how far they are from that. I want it for them. I'll give you maybe a silly example, but it's beautiful for me. I've been resting in this, but last Friday, kind of a novelty, the only time I'll get to do this, I said, I'm going to walk across that open 40 acres that they just hay baled, and that's how I'm going to show up to Fall Fest, you know? So it's a little after 6, the sun's going down on my left, I'm walking right through this field, kind of gives me a chance to contemplate approaching our parish. And I can hear the sound of children's voices screaming, euphoric on the rise. I can hear the sound of people connecting, the sound of music. And my heart was happy. Like, ask any parent what makes them most happy. It's like when everyone's together and everyone feels that they get to belong and be a part of it. And as I got close, there was a group of men who had just finished working at Bailey's. As it turned out, they were all from Mexico. So I said, aha, I get to practice my Spanish, which is not good. I think they were amused. Like, look at this father coming through the field trying to speak Spanish. But I also knew they appreciated the effort. And all I can tell you, what was in my heart was, they said, what's going on? I said, oh, this is our big Fall Fest. You should come. It's for you as much as it's for anyone. I don't actually know if they came because I don't get very far at Fall Fest from the conversations, which is wonderful. But I felt the heart of Jesus in me, like this is what he wants. We don't want the boundaries such that it makes it hard for people to find a home within us. Now, there is a place for the authority of Jesus. As a pastor, I would say the vast way that I am called to use my authority, and I would say you yours by your baptism, is to affirm the good that's there in others. And if they're open, to offer gentle correction or gentle, like, here's more, here's what we kind of believe. And I would say only 5% do I have to, as pastor, say, actually, if that's what you hold and you persist in that, it's incompatible with what we believe. There are boundaries, but it's so limited in what I have to do and what you have to do. We actually want to affirm the goodness. We want to affirm their desire. We want to accompany them. We want them to know what we know. It's a sign of maturity. I want to share. I have to share. I can't keep it to myself. So what does the second part of the gospel, hard-hitting, have to do with hospitality? You know, all this thing about cut your hand off and foot off and pluck your eye out. Well, I think it says that Jesus is very serious about sin, certainly. Like, he rewards the simple gestures as hospitality, a cup of cold water. But he's quite serious about the things that obscure or become an obstacle for people belonging to him in the church. Now, I want to make a distinction here that's really important. First of all, he's talking about anyone who does this to the little ones. Who are the little ones? They're people who are open, they're disposed to trust, they're good, they want to be in the current, they want to be in the momentum. And then the second distinction is that Jesus is asking us to be credible, not perfect. The perfectionists among us can say, well, then I should cut off my hand. Well, let me just let you in on a little truth. We're all hypocrites at times. It's a high ideal that the Lord calls us to, and he never gives up on us. He believes in us. What Jesus is talking about is when we give up on ourselves and we try to just live with a compromise. And he's saying, if you do that, you're going to make the way for people in to find me, to have communion with me and others, difficult. And so don't do that. I want to share another example. I had the blessing this past week of doing a celebration of life. It wasn't here in the church. I was so honored to do that because I had been called a few weeks back to the home after midnight. This man had just breathed his last, and And when I got to the park reserve yesterday where it was going to be, it was a room full of people. And just a little introductions, I could tell that most of them probably didn't have I don't know, you might say they weren't church, they didn't know liturgy. And so I really felt Christ guiding me to say, make this as connecting and as easy as possible for them to participate. Like Peter, speak to their desire for God. Speak from a place of vulnerability to their human vulnerability. Do you know who's most known for the virtue of hospitality in our Catholic Church? It's St. Benedict. Welcome all strangers as Christ. I have a priest friend right now who's halfway through the Camino in Spain, and I'm getting these wonderful updates, you know? But think about why the Camino's drawing people at very different places of faith. Because it's acknowledgement that as humans, we're all vulnerable. We all have need. None of us have arrived. And if I speak down to someone, even out of, like, I mean to do good, I can actually harm them. I mean, brothers and sisters, we can get the words right. We can stand up and say, everyone is always welcome here. But if we're not committed to that authentically with gestures as a community, that can actually be wounding. Because someone will say, well, that's not my experience. The only way to be hospitable is for all of us. What do I think about my brothers and sisters who I look across at? What do I think about those who are not in bounds? Am I willing? Do I want to make the effort to extend myself? I want to close with this. I've been reading a book. It's been challenging but very edifying called Radical Hospitality. I want that. I want that so much. I feel like we have a lot of it here. We're not going from nothing. It's a strength of this parish that the Lord wants to make stronger. And there's so much at stake to be in the hospitality of Jesus. There's healing and hope that people are looking for. But it often begins just with a little gesture of openness, of reaching out. But this woman says this: hospitality is born in us when we are well loved by God and others. Hospitality is the overflowing of a heart that has to share what it has received. And this is my favorite part. It takes a whole person to open up. It takes a secure person to be available. And it takes a strong person to give yourself away. It's my prayer for us that the living presence of Jesus, ever present among us, his example of genuine hospitality, prevents you and I from living either desperately or indifferently. That rather you and I would be the ones to say, I want to be that bridge. I want my very humanity, my resting face even. I want the way I shape my life to be a bridge to Jesus in the communion of the church, which has brought us such joy, such peace. I don't know about you, but I can't imagine my life without Jesus in the church. I actually don't know where I'd be. It might not be pretty. But not only that, there's so much fulfillment, so much meaning for my days, so much light. I can't keep that. You can't keep that. And today we see how passionate the Lord is on this point. Dear Jesus, we acknowledge you here among us. We ask that you would open our hearts, form them by your hospitable love.